Hello and welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. This week I thought we'd delve a little bit more into those colour personalities, and the colour for this week is of course the yellow personality. Last time I talked about yellow as a cultural idiom and the sorts of meanings that attach to yellow. This time we're going to be examining just what yellow means in terms of developing a personality of that colour. But first, I'd like to thank those of you who have been watching my videos, and especially to the subscribers. Welcome to you, and if you are new to the channel, an extra welcome to you as well. I hope these sessions are informative and that you get something out of them that you probably won't find anywhere else. So let's get started. In the past, I've examined the black and white personalities and more recently the red personality as they are formed in terms of how those colours relate to behaviours and attitudes. This time we're going to look at the yellow personality. And this is an entirely different one to the ones we've seen so far, although it does follow some similarities. Firstly, an overview of what we will be talking about. The first topic is yellow's location as a basic colour term. It is, of course, one of the early colour terms and one of the ones that is most easily learnt by young children, so it has a fair amount of importance. Secondly, we'll be going through the evolutionary process of how one develops a yellow personality. The yellow personality develops later in life than the red, white and black personalities, and there are links to those sessions in the notes below. But certainly by the time the child is moving around and independently investigating its environment, yellow becomes an important aspect of their learning experiences. The third area we'll be looking at today is how one links yellow to the various stress responses. Now, remembering that stress is not just a negative thing, it can be quite positive as well. And yellow is probably the colour that most exemplifies this. And finally, we'll be looking at how one analyses the yellow choice when it is made by an adult undergoing the colour analysis. The first thing we need to note is that yellow and green tend to emerge fairly similarly. If we revisit the little mannequin that I created some time ago, we'll notice that black and white are the basic colours of the personality, the basic orientation. You're either out there in the real world exploring and independently examining everything, or you tend to close off and become more internalized. And so therefore most of your living happens inside your head. Red, of course, is the survival colour. It's the first of the basic colour terms that we add to our language, but it also indicates the most important aspect of the learning journey for a young child. It is of importance for both groups, as in survival, but also for individualist survival, so that the child learns to negotiate those things in the world that appear to be dangerous and is able to accommodate them. Yellow and green both emerge pretty much around the same time, but in different contexts. They emerge independently of one another. So if yellow emerges as a basic colour term first, then green will follow fairly quickly thereafter, and vice versa. If green occurs first, then yellow occurs fairly quickly thereafter. So that following of each other means that it is very difficult to differentiate between the two in terms of how they emerge evolutionarily in a colour language. However, in terms of personality development, they are quite different. Examining yellow as a basic colour term exclusively, we find that it has an environmental importance. And this is one that occurred very early in mankind's trajectory towards a colour language. Yellow envelops seasonal changes. That is, autumn and fall, as you know it in America, delineates the onset of winter. It also is associated with food. Many foods ripen to yellow or through a yellow process before they then turn red. And so it is an early indicator that something is edible and probably quite delicious as well. Its social recognition, however, is a different issue altogether. It is the most abundant natural colour in the form of ochre, which was used by early mankind for painting both the body and also of the environment to indicate certain spiritual aspects of their life. It offers enhanced visibility. Yellow is probably the safest colour for indicating that something needs to be paid attention to. And of course, we mustn't forget that yellow is an indicator of prosperity and wealth, particularly when it's associated with that yellow metal that we so much prize in our societies called gold. Let's now turn to the early childhood experience that enables yellow to become part of a personality. The first thing we notice about yellow experiences is that it encourages curiosity about the environment around the child. The first indicator of a yellow experience, of course, is learning through repetition. We learn that something happens when we do something, and as long as we repeat doing that, the same thing continues to happen. And so we find children, very young children, will throw items onto the floor and expect an adult or some other caregiver to pick those items up again. And this is a real fun game for young children. It's learning through repetition. Things that are thrown away are often returned to us. The second aspect of curiosity about the environment is that as we learn through repetition, we also learn to remember those experiences, and so we can recreate them later on. But the feedback that we get from those early learning experiences in our environment will determine the type of response that we will develop. And those responses are all linked to the developing emotions that we carry around with us. The emotional memory, of course, is stored in the gut. It's that butterfly feeling when we are nervous or anxious, but it's also that trembly feeling that gives us a sense of excitement when something anticipated is about to happen. In later childhood and adolescence, the yellow experience is more associated with learning in a formal way. So we actually learn in order to remember things rather than just allow repetition to guide our learning. Now we have to remember things mentally in order to be able to regurgitate them later on. So the focus becomes one on memory, on memorizing items and being able to present those back as we are asked to do so on demand. The better our focus on memory and our abilities to learn to remember things, the more intelligent we are deemed to be. And of course, the more intelligent we are, the busier our minds become. So we find that high intelligence is often associated with a lot of thinking going on at all times. The second aspect of this learning to become a yellow personality is about seeking connections, not just connections between things that happen in our environment, but also connections that are attractions and distractions, the things that we are attracted to and the things that distract us from the things that we should be doing. Seeking connection involves developing strategies. So if you see that really nice looking boy or girl over there and you want to create a connection, then you will have to develop some strategies in order to make them aware of you and to become interested in you as well. The stresses that we develop in the process of seeking those connections are both mental and emotional, and we tend to link the mental and the emotional together, and that forms the basis of the yellow personality. There is another issue that arises with the yellow personality, and that is that the sort of learning that is embodied in most of our experiences of schooling are associated with a gendering process. Boys are encouraged as supposedly innate activities to be able to undertake mathematics and science subjects, whereas girls are discouraged from doing those because, after all, they're not feminine pursuits. But that gendering of interests and abilities does not necessarily ring true for all children. As a sociologist, I'm aware that in traditional families, we portray activities as both masculine or feminine. But we also tend to encourage learning of those masculine characteristics and activities by boys and the learning of feminine characteristics and activities by girls, so that there is a gendering of the type of yellow that a child will be exposed to and encouraged to emulate. And that gendering then becomes a form of delineating interests and abilities that an individual child will develop. Next, let's look at yellow as a stressor. Now, we know that yellow is often associated with worry work. Now, worry work has been co-opted by modern psychologists as being something that is negative, same as the word stress is associated with negativity. But stress and worry work are both positive and negative in their functions and outcomes. So we have a continuum of someone who appears not to be stressed at all, yet simply taking in a lot of information, and someone else who is taking in very little information, but is extremely stressed at the other end of the scale. So where does worry work come in? Worry work can be both helpful and very unhelpful, depending on the person's disposition and the task in front of them. Someone who has helpful worry work is determined to solve an issue or a problem in front of them. And this is often in school associated with mathematical ability. There is joy and celebration in successful resolution of those problems. If you know the answer, then you feel good about it. And that in turn will lead to an optimistic mindset. The more you know and know correctly, the better your opportunities are for learning even more. The more you learn, the more likely it is that you're going to develop an optimistic framework in your mind because you know that you are right most of the time. For unhelpful worry work, though, the situation is the reverse. There are expectations of failure. You got the answers wrong, so therefore you are marked as a failure. The more you fail, the more likely it is that you're not going to try to get better answers, and you will continue to expect to fail. Those expectations of failure, of course, will lead to succumbing to a sense of fatalism. I can't do this, I've never been able to do it, and I will never be able to do it. Those are the sorts of fatalistic outlooks that occur as a negative yellow response to stressors. And finally, of course, all of those ideas and beliefs inside the person will lead to a very pessimistic mindset. There is an expectation that you will always be a failure. And that in turn has its own ramifications for the yellow personality. So let's examine those yellow stress responses in a bit more detail. The basic white reactions were ones that I explored in an earlier video, and the link will be below on that one. But here we look at yellow as one of the basic white reactions of fight. Yellow as fight includes both positive ideations and negative ones. For someone who has a positive fight response to a yellow stressor, they are embodying the rules. The rules become part of their behavior and they are able to follow these with ease. On the other hand, the negative characteristics of a yellow as fight is someone who has a fairly chaotic resistance to both learning and also new experiences. The positive side of it is joy in expressing knowledge. I know the answer, I know what to do, I can undertake new experiences without becoming overwhelmed. So I can use past knowledge in order to make myself feel as though I'm a winner. There is a certain degree of self-transformation that accompanies this joy. As I find myself learning more and feeling competent and confident in the things that I need to face in everyday life, I transform myself into somebody who feels positive about myself and about the challenges that I'm about to face. Ultimately, though, what I'm looking for are truths. I want to know what the reality is. I want to know what is true. Not interested in falsehoods, not interested in suppositions or circumspection. I'm interested in truth. On the other hand, the chaotic resistance to a yellow reaction as fight becomes somewhat different. The child becomes argumentative and disbelieving. I didn't do that. It's not true. You're telling lies. Go away. I don't believe you. There are sleep disturbances that are accompanied by this chaotic resistance. I don't want to go to bed. I don't need to go to bed. I'm perfectly all right as I am. Leave me alone. And the child, because of the negativity of this fighting against reality, will in fact have a great deal of trouble either getting to sleep or staying asleep. And of course, that leads to school or learning phobias. And the reason for that is that I'm not getting enough sleep, I'm not consolidating enough information during my dreaming sleep, and so I am unable to learn and accommodate myself to the challenges of everyday schooling. The other basic white reaction is yellow as a fawning behavior. And again, it has both positive and negative aspects. The positive aspect of fawning is that we find happiness in receiving rewards, and so that's what we search for. The negative aspect is a deceptive shrewdness, one in which we manipulate the environment in order to obtain what we want, but it is a deceptive form of manipulation. On the positive side, whenever we achieve praise for a skill that we have learned or demonstrated, then that in itself becomes a reward, and that reward allows us to feel good about ourselves. And in a fawning aspect, it allows us to become praised and recognized by others in our environments. The connection with others, that is the ability to make friends and to maintain those friendships, is also part of that fawning behavior. As a yellow personality, you easily make friends because of your optimism and your outgoing personality. So friendships are easily maintained, easily created. But of course, this also requires a fair degree of accommodation of your own needs and desires to allow those in your environment to have their fair share as well. The other aspect of fawning as a yellow personality is that the person enjoys all sorts of new input. It doesn't matter whether it's something I'm reading or hearing or smelling or tasting. I want to experience life in all of its glory, and that's exactly what yellow as fawning does, because we need to be able to go out and acquire those experiences, whether it be through direct demanding of them or simply, as in the case of fawning, requesting the opportunities. In terms of the negative outlook, deceptive shrewdness is seen as someone who is not only highly inquisitive, but also intrusive in the way in which they approach others. Their idea of creating connections is to have so much information about that person that they are able to manipulate them. Rather than being able to accommodate that person's personality, the yellow fauna will in fact attempt to control the other person by knowing everything about them, learning all their secrets, and then using those against that person in order to obtain their own satisfactions. There is also a denial of reality's lessons. I didn't do that. I wasn't involved in this. It's not my fault. Are very common ways of creating a deceptive shrewdness that enables you to point to someone else as the transgressor or the cause of a particular activity, and therefore admonishing them rather than being admonished yourself. And there is also a fair degree of faked helplessness. I can't do it. You'll have to show me. Or it's too difficult, can you do it for me? The I can't often is more likely to be an I won't. Turning now to the basic black reactions. Here we have yellow as freeze, and the black reactions are all about internalized responses. So a freezing response is one in which the person stops an outward activity and takes on an inward perspective for continuing with whatever the problem is that they're faced with. And again, like the others, it has both a negative and a positive aspect. The positive aspect is an intellectual development, so it's a concentration on what you can learn. The negative aspect is an indecisive stalemate. I can't learn anymore, I don't know what to do, and I don't want to do anymore. The logical thought patterns of a child who is undergoing intellectual development as a yellow freeze phenomenon is one in which the child needs to be able to understand how A gets to B, gets to C, gets to D, and so forth. So there is a rational and a logical sequence that needs to be understood and able to be regurgitated. Children with yellow as a personality in the freeze state are seeking and identifying facts. They will not move on until those facts have been explored. And furthermore, that leads to the idea of give me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And in doing so, they then find a way through the freeze process. On the other hand, the indecisive stalemate of the negative response to yellow as freezing is an inability to recall information. I can't remember, I don't want to remember, is really the underlying message. They are also extremely distrustful of change. That didn't happen yesterday. You didn't ask me to do that. I'm not going to even attempt to accommodate to that change. And the stubbornness that's exemplified by the yellow as freeze reaction as from a negative perspective is that stubbornness that seems to come from those children masks a great deal of anxiety. They don't know what to do. They don't have the information. They've got a negative outlook about the potential outcomes, and so therefore they will not do what is expected of them. And that is not because they have an absolute inability to do so, but rather because of their anxiety. The other basic black reaction is yellow as flight, running away from a particular issue. And again, like the others, it has both a positive and a negative connotation. The positive yellow as flight is all about a restless curiosity. I need to keep moving. I need to keep finding out more about a particular issue. The negative aspect is a mental indigestion. The child is not able to take in any more information, so therefore flees from the opportunity or the demands made upon it. From a positive perspective, the child in yellow as flight as a positive aspect will be exploring every potential they could possibly undertake. They find that novelty and new things, examining what is new in their environment, produces a great deal of happiness. So the more they learn, the happier they are. And they find that mental activity is fun. It's something that they enjoy, and so therefore they want to repeat it. But this is all taking place inside their heads. In terms of the mental indigestion, however, the worry and anxiety that they experience is exhausting their minds. They cannot think clearly. Because they can't think clearly, they avoid studying and they avoid having to learn new things. If they already know something, then that's good enough for them. It was good enough for my dad and my granddad. Why do I have to learn this now? What's more, because of the mental indigestion, they're unable to make connections not only with new knowledge and incorporating that into their repertoire, but also they have a great deal of difficulty in finding friendships and connections between other people and themselves because they're constantly in fear of what might happen without ever exploring what will happen. So how does this translate into the adult personality? When we examine someone's personality by asking them to define themselves using yellow, they will present it as a strength, an obstacle, or how they are being challenged by yellow in the here and now. As a strength, it involves both a conscious position, that is what they are actually doing, and an unconscious drive, that is what is urging them onwards. As an obstacle, yellow becomes a problem behavior. It also involves a great number of unrequited needs that are never satisfied. As a current challenge, someone who chooses yellow to indicate this will often be under a great deal of psychological stress, and they will be having some sort of physical reaction. So let's examine in more detail yellow as a strength. In terms of an overview, yellow is all about intelligence, strategy, and being connected, being able to create those connections necessary in order to function effectively and in a continual learning capacity in the world. Historically, the person basically had a happy childhood. They were encouraged to learn, they had fun learning, and so they developed that optimistic outlook that they now look back and say, that was a great deal of fun. They also tended to be good scholars. They could do what was required of them at school, and they had very little difficulty with it. Their current situation is one of constantly learning. New stuff comes in, and they cogitate about it and come up with new ideas. They enjoy that strategizing. They can come up with all sorts of new ways of doing things that probably had never been invented before. In fact, yellow as a strength is someone who is highly inventive. They generally are very alert to all the things that are happening in their lives, and they're happy with their lives as a general disposition. Contrast this with yellow as an obstacle. Here we have a person who is easily stressed and highly distractible. They're not getting out of life what they would like to get out of life. Historically, they had great trouble in being able to learn easily. They may have experienced too many things to be able to deal with them rationally and logically, and being overwhelmed by those things caused them to close down mentally. As a result of that, of course, they now lack the knowledge to act in any new or novel situation. As a current obstacle, the yellow personality often presents as an anxiety disorder, and there are many, many of these, all of them with slightly different etiologies, but all of them associated with that same overwhelmed feeling. They have sleep difficulties, and these are associated, of course, with anxieties, and many of them will struggle with irritable bowel syndrome or some other gut issue. What about yellow in the now? Here we have 3 different ways of examining a person who has yellow in the now. They can have some excitable worry work that is functioning in their lives. They can be receiving an awful lot of attention, and they also could be suffering from potential physical issues. In terms of the excitable worry work, the positive aspect is one of being mentally energetic, always learning, always inquisitive, always exploring new things. From a negative perspective, that excitable worry work is all about scattered attention, can't concentrate, can't resolve issues. In terms of receiving attention, the positive yellow in the now is all about attracting friends. And in fact, it's interesting to note that people who wear yellow are often asked more questions than those wearing any other color. It's like yellow is a signal to the real world to say, this person knows what they're talking about, so therefore let's ask them and they will tell you the truth. From a negative perspective, in contrast, the attention receiving is all about complaining, and that person's disposition is one that often drives people away. So instead of becoming connected, they become disconnected. The potential physical issues associated with yellow in the now are pretty well all negative. There is stress and mental exhaustion. There are sleep and gut disturbances, and often these come together. And there is irritability, and in many cases, a person exhibiting yellow in the now has some form of obsessive compulsive, if not exactly disorder, then certainly a discrepancy. So let's summarize what we've learned so far. For early human beings, yellow denoted seasonal change and the ripeness of fruit, which made for delicious eating. It was important and so became one of the basic color terms. Those early learning experiences of both societies and individuals link to the way in which they perceive and understand the color yellow. Yellow as a strength produces an intelligent learner, whereas yellow as an obstacle indicates a highly anxious personality. If yellow appears in the present, it can link to great happiness or great mental and sleep disturbances. Either way, yellow is one of those colors that is highly polarized and all associated with what you are experiencing. So that's it for the yellow personality. Next time, I'll be looking at the green personality, which is not too far removed from this one, but does have some slightly different connotations. I hope you've enjoyed the session. Hope you'll be back for more. And if you liked it, please hit that like button, maybe even subscribe, because you never know what you're going to learn next here on Karen's Colours. Until next time, bye.